Hey everyone, Adam here from Adam Fiasco Productions. Hope you're doing well, having a great day. In this video, I want to show you how to get a really big, punchy drum sound that has a lot of ambience and a lot of space, even if the drums that you have recorded weren't in a particularly big space. Maybe you're recording drums and you are stuck to a smallish room, or maybe the only studio that you could get to didn't have a massive wide open room, or maybe you're using virtual drums like Slate or SD3 or even Addictive Drums 2, which are amazing drum libraries, but you just want to make the space even bigger. This is particularly important if it's like a hard rock song, if it's like alt rock or even modern country or pop rock and pop punk. These often have massive drum sounds where you just need a huge sense of space. And as you know, trying to find a massive studio with big high ceilings and big rooms is not always easy. So I want to show you how to achieve that drum sound, even if the drums that you have got are in a much smaller space. Now, it really comes down to just two processing tips, really. And that is one drum bus that I've got here, which is called the Crusher track. And this is kind of like a parallel track that's running alongside all of the drums. And then the other one is an effects track, which is this one here, which is just simply a room reverb. It's not even a particularly big room, it's a medium room. But I'm going to show you how to use this to get a massive, massive drum sound. So, before we go any further, I just want to play a little bit of this song for you. It's a quite heavy pop rock, pop punk track, very, very upbeat, and it really, really needed a big sort of drum sound. So I'm just going to play a section for you, and so you can hear what it sounds like, and then I'll show you how I did that.
Give me one night to change your mind. You say you don't know, I say don't ask why. I care if you leave this behind, 'cause I've been locked inside while you hold the key, and I've been trying to get out. But this might be the death of me, but I'm breaking out. But I'm breaking out. But I'm breaking out.
Okay, so you get the idea. The drums sound really, really big, particularly in that breakdown. I wanted the snare to sound explosive. I wanted it to fill the space, really. Now, let me just mute the drums, and I just want to play you a little bit of what you've just heard, but just with the drums soloed, particularly in that breakdown, where you can really hear that explosive snare, just so you can hear the drum sound on their own, outside of the track, and you can hear all of the space that's around them. So I'm just going to play a little bit of that for you now. Okay, so you can hear the drums have got loads of punch, they've got loads of crack from the snare, and loads of cut and energy through the mix. And there's also a big amount of space. But what you should also have noticed is that the room sound and the reverb that I'm using doesn't go on forever. And there's a good reason for that, because in music like this, in a lot of pop rock music, where you've got lots of guitars and lots of vocals, there often isn't room for a huge amount of room sound on your drums. So it's much better to keep the drum room kind of smaller and shorter, and then you can bring it up much louder and still create the sense of space. So let's begin by showing you what's happening with the Crusher track. So this is an aux track that all of my drums are going to. So every single track, as you can see, the overheads, the booms, all the kick tracks, all the snares, are all going to this Crusher. And on the Crusher, I've got mostly, in fact it's all, Slate digital plugins. The first one that I've got is this plugin here called FG Bomber. This is like an EQ and a transient designer all in one box, and it's absolutely brilliant. There are 3 presets: present, fat, and tight. that kind of do exactly as it says on the tin, and I've got it set to tight because I want the bottom end to be really, really controlled, and I also want the snare to really, really punch through. So it adds a really nice sort of like top end air and presence, and it really tightens up the lows. And then all you need to do is use the drive feature to push it as hard as you want it. If you get it in the middle, that creates a really nice sort of sharp attack, but the further you push it sort of like into this red bit, you get more sustain, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm then going into this EQ. It's just an Ssl EQ, just adding a touch of top end, so around 5k, and then I'm also adding a bit of bottom as well, so that's around 114 hertz, just adding some of that. And then the final plugin I'm going into is this one here. This is FG Grey. This is an Ssl Bus Compressor. I've got the ratio on 4:1. I've got the attack on slow because I want the transient to come through from the kick and the snare. I don't want to chop that off completely. And then the release on auto. And I've got the threshold dialed way back so that I'm getting pretty much minus 10 dB of compression all of the time. So I just want to turn this aux track on and off just to show you what it is doing. So this is with the crusher track off. Okay, now let's switch it on and listen to the same bit. So it's subtle, but what you should notice is a lot more sort of like point from the snare. The snare's a lot more present and cutting through, and the bottom end gets tightened up quite a lot. I've only dialed this in sort of like, this is at minus 11, so the fader is still quite a way down. But what I'm going to do now is play the same section, but I'm going to put the crusher track on and off so that you can hear what it sounds like when it's on and when it's off. Okay, here we go. So it just makes the drums that little bit more explosive. If we listen to nothing but the crusher track, this is just the crusher track on its own, so you can hear, you can get a sense of what that sounds like. Let me play a little bit for you now. So it's super compressed. Way too much, way too over the top in terms of the processing. But once it's blended back in with the rest of the drums, it sounds great. So then moving on to the second part of how I got this big explosive drum sound, and it's this boy right here. So this is a medium room. It's actually a Bricasti reverb sample, and this is courtesy of Verb Suites by Liquid Sonics and Slate Digital. But the actual impulse I'm using is a Bricasti impulse. It is from the BM7 unit, and it is a medium room sound. So the decay is only around 673 milliseconds. I've got the pre-delay set to around 14 milliseconds. Very slight bit of chorusing. But other than that, it's just a very, very standard room reverb. Now, what you'll notice before the room reverb, I've got some processing going into it. So the first thing I've got is this VCC plugin. This is just a console emulation. So it just emulates a channel of an Ssl 4KE console. Just adds a little bit of saturation. And then I've got this EQ, an Ssl EQ. Now, what you'll notice is I'm pushing a huge amount of 1.5K into the reverb, over 11 decibels. This is a shelf EQ, 1.5K, and I've got a huge amount being pushed into the reverb. I'm also taking a little bit of sort of like lower mids out, so 250 hertz, just ducking a little bit of that so it doesn't get too muddy. And that is before the signal hits the reverb. Now, in terms of what I'm actually sending to this reverb, I'm only sending 2 tracks. I'm sending the room mics and this snare room sample here. The reason that I'm doing that is because these snare tracks here are close mics, okay? These are close mic snare tracks, and I don't like sending the close mic drum tracks to a reverb because it almost always sounds unnatural. It sounds like a snare with a reverb on it, and that's not really what I'm wanting. I'm wanting it to sound like the whole drum kit is in a bigger space rather than kind of like an 80s style reverb on a snare. That's not what I'm going for here. Now, by sending the rooms to the reverb, all I'm doing there is just extending the room size, essentially. So these drums weren't in a particularly big room. Now, the room tracks sound great on their own, but I want them to sound bigger. So by sending them to that Bricasti reverb, it's just extending the room size. And then because I want more crack from the snare, I'm using a snare room sample to send that to the reverb, so that again I'm extending the reverb rather than putting reverb on the snare, if that makes sense. I hope that does make sense. It makes sense in my head. So what I want to do is just solo these two tracks for you without the reverb, so you can hear what they sound like. So this is just the room mics and the snare room sample. Okay, so they sound great, but I want them to sound bigger. I want it to sound like they're in a much bigger space. So let's now put the reverb in and have a listen to those same tracks now. And you can immediately hear that the drums just sound bigger. They sound like they're in a bigger space. But the decay, it doesn't go on forever because there wouldn't be room for that in the track. And that's important. That's why I've kept the actual room to a medium room rather than a large room or a hall or anything too big like that. That's important because we want to hear that initial slap from the room, but then it needs to go. It needs to go out of the way. Otherwise, the drums are going to start getting smeared and they're going to start sounding really muddy and mushy. So let's put all of that in now. So this is the drums with the Crusher track on and the reverb. Okay, now let's listen to the drums without the Crusher and without the reverb. So this is just the drums without either of those. As you can see, they still sound good, but you just don't get that same sense of space when it's disengaged. And that really comes apparent in this breakdown where you've got that big snare hit kind of ringing out. Let me play that for you now. I'm going to play the breakdown but without the Crusher and without the reverb. Take a listen to the drums in this section. They sound okay, but they just lack punch and they just lack that space and life. Let's take a listen.
But this might be the death of me. But I'm breaking out.
Okay, let's put the Crusher and the reverb back in and let's hear those drums come to life for this breakdown.
I've been trying to get out, but this might be the death of me. But I'm breaking out. But I'm breaking out. So I'm breaking out.
And there we have it. The drums really do just come to life just from that little bit of extra reverb and that extra bit of parallel processing from the Crusher. I hope that video has been useful for you. Try it on your next track if you need your drums to have more life, more punch and more space. Try it, let me know how you get on. And as ever, if you have any questions, if you need any help with any production, mixing questions, feel free to reach out by email, send me a DM on Facebook or Instagram, and I'll be happy to chat to you. If you'd like to get your hands on some free drum samples, so these are kick and snare drum samples that I have personally created and processed myself that I've actually used in this session. The samples are of a beautiful SJC premium maple drum kit, mic'd with some amazing mics in a fantastic room, in a fantastic studio over here in the UK. So if you want to get your hands on those, they are completely free. All you need to do is just sign up to the mailing list. I will leave the link below in the description. Just hit that link, enter your name and your email, and those will be emailed straight to you. Also, if you like the sound of the guitars on this particular track, I also have my very own signature Kemper Profile pack available to purchase. In this profile pack, you get access to a beautiful bass amp. This is an Ashdown ABM 600 with a 6x10 cab that sounds absolutely incredible and is one of the most versatile bass amps on the planet. It sounds amazing. Also, there's a gorgeous limited edition Vox Ac 15. Both of these amps have been profiled with numerous mics and on different settings, so you can really get pretty much any tone you like out of them. If you own the Slate VMS system, I also profile both of the amps with the Slate VMS technology so that you can actually choose the mic and preamp you want in your DAW. So that's even more creativity and versatility in your hands. So both of those links are in the comments below. Feel free to check them out. If you're not part of the Label Worthy Facebook group, then head over there and join us. It's a fantastic group full of amazing producers, artists, just like yourself, who are trying to make their music as good as possible. There's loads and loads of tips on production, mixing, but also marketing and how to attract fans and make your music stand out online. So come over and join us at the Label Worthy Facebook group. It'll be great to see you. I'll see you soon.